Walberg. My name is Tim Johnston. I'm Vice President of Marketing at Olivet College. We are thrilled to have you here. We're going to get started in just a second. If there's anything as far as rules and things like that, we'll make sure that we clear it up. If you have questions, just let us know. Right now, I'd like to introduce the Congressman. If you can call him Congressman Tim Walberg. I would also like to, if I could just do this real quick, is introduce the President of Olivet College, Dr. Stephen Corey. He's in the back. You probably can't hear me introducing him, but
hail to the President.
So we're going to start with a few questions, and then probably because of the size, we can have some discussion as we finish up those. The first question comes from Darlene from Charlotte. What are the benefits of the tax bill?
Well, Tim, thank you for being a moderator, and thank you to each of you who are here today. And small crowd, but you have the interest. And what was the old preacher that it was a snowy Michigan Sunday morning, and it appeared that very few people were showing up. In fact, only one brave farmer showed up. And he looked at the farmer and said, "You know, there's nobody else here. Should I go on with the sermon?" The farmer said, "You know, preacher, when I have the food set out for my cattle and if only one showed up, I still feed it. So I think you ought to preach your sermon." Well, the pastor thought, that's great, and he went on and he preached and he preached and he gave it the full bore, and he held nothing back and went on and finished up and went down to shake the hand with the one farmer that was the only one still there, and he said, "Well, brother, how do you think I did? What do you think of the sermon?" I said, "Well, preacher, back when that one cow shows up to be fed, I'll feed it, but I'm not going to founder it." So we're glad you showed up. We don't want to founder you either, and want to have opportunity to answer your questions. The benefits of the tax plan, well, I think you're seeing it. 160 plus businesses already announced. I think it's beyond that now, probably up to about 170. Yesterday with DTE and Consumers Energy announcing that as a result of the tax cut proposal, DTE has listed $190 million of savings that they're going to give to the ratepayers in their rates. $190 million. Consumers came out, they're giving $200 million. At least that's the request they've given to the Public Service Commission, and expect to receive that. So in our rates for your energy, you're going to see benefits. The other businesses are talking of one-time bonuses of $1,000, $2,000 per employee. Former Speaker Pelosi said that's crumbs. That's not my district. That may be San Francisco. But a $1,000 bonus to my constituents, we're talking about a vacation, we're talking about a health insurance plan purchase, a number of things. That isn't snibbled at. Salary and wage increases have already been indicated by numerous businesses. You see FCA, Chrysler, announcing they're bringing 2,500 jobs to Michigan. Many of those jobs back from Mexico. Building the trucks here now. Those are benefits. And then the optimism that we're feeling out there, that you have immediate expensing that can be done for capital outlays in businesses, and we're talking about major corporations as well as small businesses, that goes directly to their bottom line, gives them the ability then to share that with their employees. That's a huge benefit. I like to show this particular graph, and my good friend Joe Wilson got me into this site and this idea that when somebody starts grousing about tax cuts and I know my trackers are filming this, so hopefully they can see this graph as well. Do you know what that is? If you can see that, I wish I had I guess an iPhone 10 that was bigger, but that's a stock market. And that's the consistent climb from the beginning of the year to now, right now. Now, we all know, if you know anything about stocks, there can be corrections, and there will be corrections that take place. But in the intervening time, to have the opportunity to see that type of growth that indicates optimism here in this country for investors, if you're on a pension, have retirement savings, that's a good graph. That's all going to your bottom line, not simply the stocks. That's going to your bottom line to make your retirement funds more secure where they're invested. And so we want to see that continue. So, I mean, what you see here, Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, family of 4, the median family, $73,000 of combined income, 58% tax bill reduction, savings $2,059. And that's not figuring in the added benefits of what takes place as a result of wage increases that go into that as well. That would amount to an average over $4,000 actual living expense, dollars increase for that family. Single parent with 1 child, $41,000 income, 73% tax bill reduction, a savings of $1,304.50. Small business owner, income of $100,000, 24% tax bill reduction, $2,603 savings. And then with the standard deduction increase that was put in the bill, individual was $6,000, now it's moved to $12,000. A family of 4 filing jointly, the average deduction, or the standard deduction before was $12,000, now it's $24,000. All of that goes to the ability of having each of us with more in our pockets. And come February, which is right around the week's corner here, when you see your wages and you get your paycheck and you see that there's less withholding taken out of it, that's an increase that the working family, the working individual can experience, and that's a tax benefit. So there are a lot of tax benefits. I think there's still to come, plenty more. But I know as Alex and I travel around and visit manufacturing sites, small businesses, Alex would concur, the last 2 years there were a lot of pessimistic visits that we had. A lot of concerns about how am I going to pay the health insurance for my employees. We've had employers literally in tears with their insurance agents sitting next to me showing me what the cost was as a result of the Affordable Care Act that was now on the backs of the business that had provided health care, total health care coverage, paid for it all since the inception of their company for the past 50 years, and now they legitimately were saying they would not be able to do that. And they felt, as a family, that they didn't want to do that so much. So those things have changed. Now we go and there's optimism, there's talks of expansion, there's talks of certainty, of security to make steps that they'd like to step, hire more employees, expand their business, build new facilities. I think we need to continue that. So that's what's taken place so far in less than a month since its passage. You wanted to add to that?
Well, I just related question. Just a couple days ago, President Trump announced some tariffs on solar panels and 1 or 2 other items. Is that going to coincide with the benefits to the USA and so on?
Yeah, I have not had a chance to look in depth at it, but what I've got from counselors so far is it's not as significant as it's being portrayed. It's more or less a shot across the bow saying, we're back, we're going to make America great first, and we're going to put a shot across the bow of some of the foreign suppliers to say, listen, you need to understand that your countries, you're putting tariffs on our goods, extra taxes on ours, and we're not going to accept that. So I think that's the case. And these are parts for solar industry that are being supplied that frankly may help some of our own businesses to do their own. So we'll see. But again, I haven't had, it just was announced yesterday. So.
Great. Congressman Barber from Eaton Rapids would like to know about the tax bill as it impacts immigrants and their benefits from that.
There should be no change as far as immigrants. Immigrants are required, if they're legal, that's the key, if they're legal, have the proper visa, green card, etc. to work, they pay taxes, including Social Security. Now, if there is any evidence of them not paying the same taxes we do, I haven't seen it yet. So if there's a concern there, Barbara, and I think I know who Barbara is, if your daughter can get me further information specifically on where it's not perceived that they're paying the same taxes as anyone else would be paying legally, I'd like to know about that and try to find the answer for it. But I think the bigger question is the whole immigration question. And the shutdown that took place last week in Congress kind of set us back on the issue of dealing with comprehensive immigration reform, which the President wants to do, starting with securing our borders, making sure that the people that here are here legally, and dealing with the DACA problem that was brought on by our last administration, and taking into his own hands that issue and saying, first, I think the number was around 14, 17 times he said he didn't have authority to deal with the so-called dreamers that were here, who were brought over by their parents through no fault of their own, no choice of their own, but are here. This is the only country they, for the most part, know. So he said, I don't have the authority to do that, so Congress needs to do it. And then ultimately he got frustrated with that and said, I'm going to do it by executive order. And so we have DACA in place. Our new president, I think rightfully so, came in and said, I truly don't have the authority to make that a law. And so I'm turning it back to the Congress. And I'm telling Congress you have to March 5th to fix it, to come up with a plan and present it to me. And we're on track to do that. And that including dealing with securing our borders, dealing with chain migration. In fact, let me just read to you the exact list of 4 points that the President, in an open meeting that you probably all saw on TV, uncharacteristic to have that cabinet table open to the media, and all of the leaders from Congress that were there, including some of the key committee leaders like Bob Goodlatte, who was there, Tom Cotton from the Senate, and then you had the majority and minority leadership, except for the Speaker of the House and Nancy Pelosi there. And the reason that they weren't there was because they felt that that would cause a problem. And so Paul Ryan said if it'd be a problem for Nancy Pelosi to be there, then I won't come. And so they had Steny Hoyer, Chuck Schumer, etc. there at that meeting. And they agreed. And that's why I was so frustrated this last week when Chuck Schumer changed direction along with Lindsey Graham and did try to do an end around this agreement by bringing their own so-called bipartisan plan to the President. And you know the results of that, the President turned them down. But the agreement was made, 4 negotiation points agreed to, and it would be the document that would define what the immigration, including DACA reform, would be. First point was DACA. Second was border security. Third was family reunification or chain migration, meaning the same thing. And the fourth was visa lottery. Those 4 points were on the table, were agreed to, it would go away, and that's the plan that he said. If this group brings a plan back to me, I'm going to sign it. Of course, he knew that that group had to get past me and all my other colleagues as well and explain to us why their plan was something we should support. That's how it always works. So the president, I think, understood very clearly that if that group is able to come back to me and say, we have the support of our conferences, House, Senate, Democrat, Republican, and this is the plan we've agreed to, he would sign it. And so that is still the plan going forward. There was negotiations going on during the shutdown. There were meetings taking place about that. I was in several of those, and those were the four points we're talking about. That's the issue even more than what presently is paid or not paid in taxes or regulation fees, etc., by immigrants. So we'll see what moves forward. It has to be done. Right now it's scheduled something to be brought up for consideration by February 8th, but the plan still says March 5th is the date to come up with a DACA fix.
Thank you.
Any additional on that before we move on to the next question? Yes.
I just asked a question that kind of goes on that. You've talked about immigration reform. What specific immigration reforms are you looking at in order to help people be able to come here legally? I know the 4 points that are there, but it's the details within those 4 points that are important.
I think number one, we have to find a way to deal with these DACA, identified DACA recipients who are not criminal. If they are, they gotta go back. We don't need, we grow our own criminals. Enough. We don't need any more. So I think there's a general, strong feeling out amongst the public that if you've committed crimes, go home. If you don't know where your home is, find it.
So is criminal a traffic violation?
No, I don't think it'd be that. What we're talking about case law type people being the worst, down to drug trafficking, human trafficking, robbery, theft, those type of things. Traffic, no, that's...
And how come all the people are being deported who have been, have like a traffic violation, so now it's...
They're going to be deported because they don't have legal documentation to be here. They've had visa overstays. I mean, we have hundreds of thousands, literally, of visa overstays in this country. That's the problem. And we've got to get a handle on that. I can't overstay my visa in Uganda when I go visit my family there. I can't overstay a visa in Mexico, or I go to jail. America needs the same thing. So that'll be very clear on our immigration reform. Dealing with DACA recipients, get that fixed. And I think there's general feeling that we will find a way to make them legal, not citizens, but legal. And over a time period, if they keep their nose clean, live according to our rules and laws, then they'll have a pathway to citizenship that is basically the same pathway to citizenship anybody else would have. But they're going to have to show that they are abiding by our rules and our laws for, I think will be agreed to about a 10-year period of time. And traffic violations, unless they're extreme, chronic, won't be a concern. On the area of border security, that has to be part of it. The people elected this president because he said he was going to secure the borders of this country. And we feel that that is extremely important. It doesn't have to be a wall or a fence or electronic surveillance. It can be all of the above. We have to make sure those borders are secure. And it has to be for reasons of keeping terrorists out, drugs, human trafficking, and all of the rest, but also simple illegal immigration as well. There has to be a reform of our immigration laws where they're too stodgy in the way they deal with it and demand more time and effort than they should, and gives more incentive for people to find a way around. That's not good. Ronald Reagan was known to say that the gates to the United States ought to swing wide and free for all who desire to experience the American dream and participate in the American way. But they've got to sign the guest book. And when you have a secure border, then you can more easily make sure people sign the guest book. Speak our language, love America. We ought to mandate that if you're coming here, you come because you love America and the way America does things. If that's not the case, why you're coming here? And I want to be as blunt as that. I don't want to show any lack of compassion. I'm here because of immigration of my father and grandparents. They loved America, to the point that Grandma never taught us Swedish. We asked her to teach us Swedish. No, no, no. We're Americans. God bless America. And that was her personal opinion. I wish she had taught me Swedish, though. And rather than eating lutefisk. Still don't understand why Swedes like lutefisk, or say they do. But so those are key things. Fixed immigration laws need to be fixed. Secure our borders. Fix the DACA issue. And remember, all of what we're talking about here are just symptoms of a bigger problem. The bigger problem is we don't do immigration right. And we don't follow our laws. So now when the president and this administration says, I don't have a choice, the law says that my ICE agents, my Customs and Border Patrol agents have to do this. Even if there's a good doctor, at least information we know so far, who's been here a number of years, but he's not legal. And so now we've taken him in, and we're going to be deporting him, and it sounds insensitive, lack of being compassionate, all the rest, and yet, when truth be told, is he here legally or isn't here? And why isn't he if he isn't? So that's the main guts.
So just as a follow-up, so would one way of fixing that is, because part of it is like the limited number of people that, immigrants that can come here that we accept, or the procedure that they have to go through to get those visas renewed, or further citizen prevents people from trying to take that legal status at times.
Yeah, and it always will, and always did.
Not always. I mean, there were times when there was no limit to the amount of immigrants that came. They came on the boat, got to Ellis Island, and they came in.
Very few times. Historically, there were boatloads of people sent back because of sickness, because of no assurance that they had anything that they could give to America. You know, my family came over as stonemasons, and you can go along Michigan Avenue in Chicago right now, see the efforts, their labor's results. And they added too, but we had people, you just have to go to Ellis Island and read the sad stories of families that were split apart because a certain member was sick with a disease that America couldn't bring into their borders at that time. They didn't believe they should. So they were put on the boat and sent back. Heart-wrenching stories that went that way. But it was done, at least to perceive that time for the best benefit of America. And that still should be the place. And it's a difficult thing to do, but we can't just throw the borders wide open. And I think there has to be a reason for people to come. That's why chain migration has to end. Just because Billy's here doesn't mean that mom, dad, sister, brother, aunts, uncles, grandfather, second cousin, twice removed can come. And I think that our immigration reform will say, even for the DACA recipients, just immediate family, mom, dad, sister, brother, will be the ones that come. So I want to get on with some of the other questions, but we have such a small group here, it's pretty easy to have communication back and forth as well, and I'll say one more and then we'll go to the next question.
Okay. This gets a little dicey, but I think what Trump is trying to avoid is saying, okay, the DACA kids were brought here illegally, so we're going to let them stay because it wasn't their choice. But we don't want to say, okay, and then the parents who brought them here illegally get to come because of chain immigration.
Right. That's absolutely right, because the parents, for whatever reason, still came illegally. That's what it means to be illegal. And we are a nation of laws. And if we throw out laws, then what do we become? And that doesn't mean we're insensitive. We'll hurt for some of these. Definitely will hurt. And that's why I think we have to fix our immigration laws so they aren't onerous to the point that they're just blocking good people and making it more difficult than it has to be. And then some people say, if that's the case, I'm going to find a way in one way or another. That doesn't justify them doing a legal thing, but certainly a perverse incentive for them to do a legal approach. So let's look at the laws. Can we fix them to cut some of the red tape so good people longing to be free, to enjoy the benefits of American freedom with responsibility, let's never forget that, freedom with responsibility, can come in more readily. But then also still leave it our responsibility to determine the percentage, the numbers that we can take at this time. And when right now you're looking at some of the lowest unemployment numbers in history, in certain groups, like African Americans, the lowest number of unemployment percentage in the history of the United States. And yet you have people that are still abusing the welfare system of all races and nationalities that could be working and filling those final slots that we're bringing immigrant labor in to do. And they're not willing to do it. That's a problem. And so I think there's a time when we have to, number one, provide the education for the real world jobs. Number two, expect accountability and responsibility for able-bodied individuals. You've got to be working. If you're not working, you're not going to carry it. America is starting to get pretty resolute in saying that. It's time. It's a great place to live, but you're all going to carry your weight if you can. If you can't, then we have social benefit programs that are there, the safety net. We want that. If you're able-bodied, you ought to be working or getting educated toward a job that you will step in. And then in the case that we get that type of thing, then we have to ask, what is the percentage? What are the numbers of immigrants that we should allow in so that we don't make a social welfare problem for them and for us until the jobs are there? Not easy, but I'm still glad that it's people clamoring to get in America as opposed to get out. Thank you.
Congressman Robert from Lansing, he supports the president's position to hire more Border Patrol agents in the wall. He's curious, what is the status of the construction of the wall?
There's limited or no construction taking place right now. As you've seen the pictures of the contractors that are putting up samples of what they would say would be the best approach for a wall. I don't think we're doing samples of fences yet. I think probably electronic surveillance drones, those we're looking at where they work, because there's certainly some places where a wall wouldn't be necessary with the topography of the area, cliffs and things like that, where a drone flying over would work just as good. But the walls are being looked at, and I think seriously there's talk about the president actually going and taking a look at some of the renderings or the actual physical production of these walls. They have had military special ops teams trying to get up, over, around, under these walls, and so far I've heard, as recently as last week, and I don't sit on Homeland Security, so I probably don't have all the information, but that they've been unable to get through most of these walls that have been put up. And then it comes down to cost. We have the money. We appropriated money for the wall back in 2010 or 11, I think. Look at my chief of staff. His memory sometimes better than mine. So that those walls have been funds have been appropriated and authorized, but haven't been expended yet. We've also given the president in recent legislative efforts. In fact, all 12 bills of our funding package passed out of the House on time, in budget, sit over in the Senate since September 14th when we passed it. So when you hear Chuck Schumer stand up and then Steny Hoyer, before we finally passed the deal the other night in the House, say it's time for us to have a full spending package voted on, regular order. I was glad to see our very kind but knowledgeable Speaker of the House respond to that and say, Steny, how can you say that? We passed that out of the House in a bipartisan fashion because of Chuck Schumer's filibuster that hasn't been taken up for a debate in the Senate since September 14th. It's time that you talk to Chuck Schumer and say, stop this filibuster, take it up, debate it, and pass it, send it back to us, and we'll work out the differences in the conference committee. So the dollars are there for the wall as well.
Thank you. Another question from Robert. What is your position on sanctuary cities and states and the conflict with federal law?
Do we want anarchy? We fought a war in this country when some states decided they were not going to abide by our country's laws and constitution. My southern colleague friends calls it the war of northern aggression. We call it civil war. We fought that. I believe in states' rights as much as anybody. But when it comes down to federal issues, that you can't have a smattering of laws and states who expect the federal government to step in and spend money, in fact, in their states on these issues, but want to make their own laws, it becomes anarchy. Sanctuary cities, now come on. These same cities like San Francisco and Ann Arbor want federal dollars for law enforcement issues. Well, if they don't want to abide by the law, and you have some mayors and the Attorney General of California right now saying we will bring business owners in to court if they abide by the federal requirements for reporting visa overstays and illegal aliens that come into their business. That's anarchy. So I certainly have and will continue to support laws and rules that will take away, initially, resources from states and communities that violate the federal law relative to immigration. That's a federal requirement. That's a federal purpose to secure our borders, to secure the safety of our citizens against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And that involves having immigration rules and border security rules that protect our citizens. So, sanctuary cities, call that cities committing a legal contempt of federal law.
Darlene from Charlotte would like to know what you and Congress are doing about skilled trades.
Good question. For too long, we thought everybody should go to a four-year college or university. And I'm sitting here at a great four-year college, doing a great job, and it should be here. And I was glad talking with the president that this has been, this year it had the largest enrollment in their history. And retainment is at great numbers as well. I'm glad to hear that. But I also know that there are plenty of young people who would be better off and find a sweet spot more quickly by going through a route of community college leading to a certification, going through an apprenticeship program, and preparing for real-world jobs that, frankly, we are missing right now. In the trades, skilled trades, IT, advanced manufacturing, et cetera, that don't require a four-year college or university education, but require continuing education after high school. And so our Higher Education Act, which we have passed out of the House Education Committee, and I sit on that committee, made a very level-headed attempt to foster those opportunities by saying not only will we encourage a continuing education, higher education in community college, trade schools, apprenticeship programs, but will also allow grants like the Pell Grant, etc., and loan programs to be used for those training or education sites as well. Why shouldn't we allow a Pell Grant to go to someone who is going to go through an apprenticeship program, by the Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, for instance, or by a maintenance apprentice program. All of that is necessary for our manufacturing and our business community. So that was a real effort to move that direction. In the area of federal job training programs, this was 2 years ago. We had President Obama sign this law that changed our approach to that and reduced the number of federal job training programs from, I think, 45 overlapping and redundant programs down to 15. The House, we put it down to 7, Senate, and the compromise moved it up to 15, but nonetheless significantly reduced federal programs, took those dollars and are giving them back to the states and even to local school districts and certain manufacturing corporate job providers and trainers as well. So that kids, even at the junior high, high school level, will have opportunity for internships, for vocational education experiences, and the resources will be back in the states to use as they determine best, or the local community schools. And so we're seeing results from that. So we kind of, for a while, thought that, in fact, one of our presidential candidates, whose name I'll leave nameless because he was from my party, but he's absolutely wrong. When he came to Michigan and said, listen, Michigan, manufacturing's over. We're in a service economy, and it's not coming back, so get over it. And then he didn't come back either, and he didn't win his election either. I mean, that's absurd. A country like ours is not still based on manufacturing. With the innovation skills that we have here, one thing I was delighted to see when I went to China for the first time was while they are indeed competitors, they are great imitators, but they're not great innovators. We're innovators here in this country. And we've always encouraged innovation in this country. Entrepreneurialism, inventors. I mean, one of the key purposes of the federal government is to have patent control, so we can make sure that inventors are treated appropriately, and when they do something, their idea isn't stolen from them, and they will benefit from their mind and the invention that they've done. And so I think we are finally waking up and saying we missed it for a while. We got off the path. We still want these universities, we still want these great colleges, but we also want a whole gamut of other opportunities to educate people for real-world opportunities that ultimately will be their sweet spot.
Thank you. Judy from Diamondale would like to know, what cuts do you foresee to help balance the budget?
Oh, man.
With the tax cuts, I'm sorry.
The tax cuts, my concern with the tax cuts, as it has been in the past, the history of tax cuts, except back maybe with John F. Kennedy, we've seen the revenue grow because of that. More revenue has come in because people had resources to use on their own. So they spent, they invested. Ultimately, the expansion of the economy produced more revenue coming into tax dollars, even though you reduced the tax. Sadly, Congress has a track record now for many, many, many years through the Reagan tax cuts, Bush tax cuts, the Clinton tax cuts, etc. And we spent the increase. We spent ourselves further into debt. And then during times of downturn, we still spent, and we didn't restructure. And so we have to do that. That has to be a change, and that will take discipline. And frankly, I think we have a president now who will hold our feet to the fire. We have a Speaker of the House who is an economist and is a conservative in understanding that we cannot do what we've done in the past. If any benefit is to come, we ought to be giving those additional revenues back to further assist the economy and the private sector and individuals, as opposed to spending it ourselves. Then we have to get control of our mandatory spending. Let me be as brief as I can. our budget consists of discretionary spending and mandatory spending. Mandatory are things like Social Security, Medicare, certain key elements of our military, though not completely. The Affordable Care Act is mandatory spending because it's a law and can only be changed by a president's signature. So anything that would take a president's signature to change, amend, alter is mandatory. Discretionary areas are things what we'll expend on certain agencies, various programs that come as a result of the agency. We can cut those, but that's only 40% of our total budget. 60% is mandatory. So until we have a president who's willing to sign reductions in mandatory spending, and until we can get those bills out of the Senate and to the White House to say, will you sign it or will you veto it, we can't reduce mandatory spending. We've reduced discretionary spending consistently since 2011. In 2010, Patty Murray, Senator Murray, a Democrat, who chaired the Budget Committee in the Senate, and Paul Ryan, who then was the Budget Committee chair in the House, a Republican, came to an agreement called the Ryan-Murray Plan. And that plan established 2011 spending levels as the level that we're going to keep to. So right now in discretionary spending, we're basically at 2011 expenditure levels. That's why the military is screaming, because we haven't been able to get changes in that because of sequestration. And now, without the Senate willing to stop the filibuster and give the 60 votes necessary to get the mandatory expenditure spending bills through, so we can get at the president's desk, we can't change that. And that's why we're seeing concerns with planes dropping out of the sky, helicopters, ships running into other ships, lack of training. We have 75% of all the Marine fighter jets are grounded for lack of parts, repair. 50% of all of the Navy aircraft, 50% are not flying now because of lack of training hours and repair. We can't keep doing that. We're still the strongest, largest military in the world. We're only the second largest army. North Korea is the largest army in the world. And if we keep this filibuster event going, we're going to have problems. So to cut spending, we need the ability to get the 12 bill package we sent from the House, which has significant restructuring in all areas. Keeping the promises in Social Security, Medicare, because we have to. Those are true entitlements, not welfare. If you get my drift. We have mandatorily paid into those with the agreement that we would receive it. I'm entitled to that. I'm on Medicare. I'm entitled that Medicare pay for what they promised to pay for. We need to keep those promises, but there are plenty of other areas in education, in commerce, in EPA, energy. We have to decide, are we going to have an energy department twice or an EPA department twice? There are things we can do in reforming and ultimately grow the economy, and we'll see the debt start to decrease as well. One encouraging thing, that because of the tax cuts, the Social Security Trust Fund has received an uptick in dollars going into it since that took place. Why? Because of the growing economy, because of ultimately then more dollars from more employment going into the Social Security Trust Fund, and the interest issues that developed because of the growing stock market as well.
Thank you. We have two more questions. From Robert in Lansing, what is your position on the national voter ID legislation?
I'm kind of mixed on it. We have legal documents that show that we are citizens. Those are things like our driver's licenses. Those are things like a state ID that we can have at no cost that proves that we are legal citizens of this country and of this state. But if there is a problem concerning knowing for certain that everyone who votes is not simply a legal person, but is a citizen of this country with all the rights and privileges given to him or her, including voting, I'd certainly support that. That's why I've supported in the past requiring people to show their IDs in order to vote. I don't see that as in any way, shape, or form impinging upon a person's right to vote. I don't see why that should discourage anybody from voting. And when we give free ID cards here in the state of Michigan, so it doesn't cost anybody something to have a certification that I legally should be able to vote. I just don't get the complaint out there that that's trying to hold back the vote of certain people and certain groups of people. And I think it's time that the general public, American citizens who love America and want to see our system continued without error or fraud, need to stand on our hind legs and say so.
Thank you. Judy from Dimondale, do you support the Aspire Act for TPS people from Haiti, El Salvador, or Nicaragua?
Refreshing my thinking, Aspire Act, who had the question
That was proposed last year that there would be a path of citizenship or at least extending their temporary protective status through rather than now as Trump is
Yeah, I don't support it.
doing all that.
I'm glad you added to that. Temporary protective status was there simply because they were asking for asylum and protection from what was going on in Haiti and a couple other places. Those things have changed now. And I think unless there is clear evidence that they are a great bodily harm capability, it's time for them either to go through the proper immigration route like everybody else or go back to their country.
But it wasn't just because the temporary protective status for both Haiti and El Salvador was as a result of natural disasters. I mean, Haiti has not recovered from the earthquake yet. Now they've been hit with the hurricanes this year. They don't have an economy to support those people. They are actively working here now in jobs that have been here for 10 or 15 years.
It's time to go back. They could be a help to their country.
But if there are no jobs there, how are they?
Well, they've been trained here. They have some skills they can take back to their country. When will it be the time for them to go back? I mean, we have challenges here too. And I think we provided a service to those people that was good and proper. But there is a timeline. I mean, when you're talking 10 years, 5 years, 10 years, how long will it take? And then if that's the case, is it time for them to actually live for citizenship by going through the proper immigration to this country, as opposed to keeping another temporary status that becomes permanent? That's the trouble with DACA. It's gone on for too long, and that was rightfully so. Barack Obama's concerns that we have these people who didn't know really any other country than this. And if they fear being sent back to a country that isn't theirs, that's not a good thing, so we've got to do something. And he was right to say to Congress, you need to do something. It was wrong that Congress didn't do something, but it wasn't right that he stepped in either, as opposed to pushing it still further. And I think with temporary protective status, that has to be there, but it should be temporary. I don't think 10 years is temporary. And so now we get in a situation where we have other DACA kids potentially being developed because we don't end at a point in time temporary and say it's temporary. So no, I wouldn't support continuing on. We can put all nice terms with it, Aspire Act. You know, we're good at putting nice terms that really don't truly say what the program is, like net neutrality. It was just the opposite. They put a silk covering on on a sow's ear with net neutrality and tried to get away with that. Fortunately, we had someone who saw that that was discouraging net neutrality. It was government control is what it should have been. And now, because we've done away with net neutrality regulation, we're seeing significant investment in what we wanted to see, and that was broadband. Huge investment that's coming back now because we've taken the government control off of it and let the internet begin to work itself again. The same way with these temporary status situations. They need to be temporary. I've got a prison in my district that in 1986 was offered in Adrian, Michigan as a temporary facility. It's still there, and it's still full of prisoners. That's the last one. We have 5 more minutes, 6 more minutes. I'd be glad to discuss anything further. We've tried to answer everything. We certainly understand the situation with a room full or a small room of people that we don't all agree on everything, but we're still Americans. And I like to always say, let's remember that and count our blessings day by day for that reason. I mean, it's a great country. We have personalities in this country that are different and unusual at times, but it's a country that impacts the world. That's why they're coming here, as opposed to us leaving. Even those that say that if so-and-so is elected, I'm going to leave this country, ultimately they don't leave. It's too good of a place. So let's keep working.
I just want to tell you, thank you, Congressman, for coming to having these coffee hours and explaining things to us.
Glad to do it. I think that's my responsibility. Glad you arrived. Don't want to single you out, but
That's fine.
I mentioned we had, well, now 5 more minutes. I don't know if you had a question that you came, a burning question.
I don't, I just had another meeting, I told me to get here earlier, but
Yeah.
thanks for coming.
We settled the world's problems here. Now we'll go out to the next meeting.
I can sleep easy tonight.
Problems will still be there. Thank you.